Hello, I'm Kate Bradbury. In this Get Dorset Buzzing film, we're going to talk about ways you can help pollinators in autumn and winter. Now, you might not think that autumn and winter are a really good time to help pollinators, but there's a lot you can do in your garden that can help them hibernate safely over winter and be in perfect condition to get buzzing again in spring. Now, if you think about the life cycle of the bumblebee queens emerge in spring. They find somewhere to make a nest, they lay eggs. Bumblebee queen will lay 6 eggs, and those eggs hatch into grubs, and the grubs pupate, and then they turn into the first worker bees. Worker bees are all female, and they don't have babies of their own. Their whole role in the nest is to gather pollen and nectar for the next batch of grubs that the queen lays. So the first couple of batches of eggs the queen lays, she will then spend all of her time in the nest laying eggs, and her workers will be going out gathering pollen and nectar for the grubs back in the nest. Now, what's this got to do with autumn? Well, towards the end of summer, the queen will start laying eggs that turn into daughter queens and males. And those daughter queens and males will then go out and mate with daughter queens and males from other nests. And then the males will die, the workers will die, the original queen dies, and the daughter queens will find themselves somewhere to hibernate over winter. Now, queen bumblebees, they'll hibernate anywhere from an old plant pot you've got lying in your garden, to some of them dig holes underground. They might nest in your compost bin, or in a leaf pile, or a log pile, or a pile of grass clippings in the corner of your garden. So if you think of your garden as a series of habitats, then suddenly, as a bumblebee queen, if you see your garden through the eyes of a bumblebee queen, you might suddenly start seeing different areas of your garden as potential hibernaculums for these daughter queens. So in autumn, as a wildlife gardener, it's really important to not clear everything away as you might normally. So make sure there are habitats in place. So if you want to clear the big pile of leaves from the corner of your garden, then make sure you put some leaves at the back of your border so that bumblebees and other species such as frogs, hedgehogs, toads, lizards, slow worms, they can find somewhere to hibernate as well. Never empty your compost bin in winter, because bumblebees, other insects, hedgehogs, toads, all manner of species could be hibernating, and it just disturbs them. Bumblebees and other insects need to be cool and dry in autumn. So just think about that. Just think, is there somewhere in your compost bin where they can just sneak down, really low down, and just remain cool and dry and undisturbed all winter? It's also a really good time to take down your bee hotel and pop it in your shed. But just make sure you take it out again in April, because the bees will be waking up then and they'll need somewhere really hot and sunny to emerge from. Another thing you can do, you might not want to have big piles of leaves. Your garden might be not big enough for piles of leaves. You might just have a small balcony or a doorstep. So one thing you can do that's really effective is just get an old plant pot. It doesn't need to be a glazed pot. It can be any old pot that you're just not using at the time. Get some really nice dry, crinkly leaves and just pack the pot full of leaves. And you could put this on your patio. You could pop this at the back of the border. Sometimes you can partially bury the pot in the ground. Just make sure when you do, it's angled that way, so that when it rains, the rain sort of comes down and it falls off this way, and it keeps the leaf material inside dry. And again, in here you'll get anything from bumblebees, other insects, beetles, worms, maybe frogs and toads, small mammals resting in here as well. And that's just a really lovely, easy habitat you can make for bees and other insects. It's also a good idea in autumn to think about the year ahead. So every autumn I plant crocuses for bumblebees when they're coming out of hibernation. Crocuses are fantastic plants for spring bees. They flower really early, they're loaded with pollen and nectar. Bumblebees and honeybees love them. So every autumn I just plant a little pot of crocuses, and gradually over the years I'm creating this really huge mass of crocuses for spring flying bumblebees when they emerge from hibernation. All you need to do is get a pot of compost, fill it 2/3 full. As a general rule, the size of the bulb or corm, you plant it about 3 times the depth of the size of the corm or bulb itself. So this is probably, we're going to bury it about that deep. But don't worry, Bulbs and corms have what's called contractile roots, so even if you do plant it at the wrong depth, it will sort itself out. Crocus corms here, it's quite easy to see the top from the bottom. The top's got this little tufty bit here, and the bottom's just a flat plate. So you just plant them in the pot, like so. Don't worry too much about planting them too close together or anything like that. They're really easy plants to grow. And then after a couple of years, you might need to repot them, but you can certainly get away with 2 or even 3 years of not really doing anything. So you plant the bulbs in here, and then you top off with compost, like so. Just get that so it sits just below the soil, the rim of the pot there. Tamp it down nicely so they're nice and snug. Give that a good water, and you can put that behind your sheds for the rest of the season, and then you can get it out in February and just put it somewhere sunny, and the corms will grow. What they'll do now is they'll grow roots, and they'll start to sort of think about growing, and then they'll go into sort of dormancy over winter, and then in spring they'll push that final bit of growth through, and then they'll come through, they'll flower, and they'll feed bees. Now the wonderful thing about crocuses is that the flowers open in the sun and they close in the shade. So one, it's really important to plant them in sunshine so that you get the most out of your crocuses, and so the bees get most out of the crocuses as well. But the other thing to think about is, because they open during the day and close at night, is that some queens which haven't found somewhere to make a nest will actually sleep in the crocus flowers overnight, which is the cutest thing. And if you get up really early in the morning, about 5 or 6 in the morning in spring, and you go and look at your pot of crocuses, you might find a bumblebee sleeping in the flowers. And for more about the Get Dorset Buzzing campaign, visit the Dorset Wildlife Trust's website.